Good morning. I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak today. I loved recently seeing in your booklet the seventh principle, which is respect for the independent web of all existence of which we are a part. And that principle fits well with this quotation from E.O. Wilson, who is known as father of biodiversity. He says, "The earth is our home. Unless we preserve the rest of life as a sacred duty, we will be endangering ourselves by destroying the home in which we evolved and on which we completely depend." So I am glad to be back today to talk to you about the Environmental Conservancy of Northport and surrounding areas. So living in Florida, I'm sure you know how nice it is to wake up to the beautiful song of a mockingbird or to see a pair of cranes flying overhead. And I'm sure it goes without saying how important it is to protect our animals here and the habitat they rely on to live and thrive. The Environmental Conservancy of Northport and surrounding areas grew out of the need for that protection. Its mission of the Conservancy is to acquire and conserve and/or restore undeveloped natural land, parcels and neighborhoods of Northport and the surrounding areas, and beyond to provide permanent native green space for nature as our population continues to grow at a rapid pace. The Conservancy was started in 2019 by Barbara Lockhart of Northport. I had the pleasure of meeting Barbara at a time when I was chairing Northport Friends of Wildlife, an organization I had started in 2014. We talked about red tide and the fact that the city was spraying her canal and how the two could be related because the canal eventually drains out to the Miaka River and ultimately the Gulf. We also discussed the clear cutting and city's tree ordinance and the fact that the builders were clearing fee-free. I was concerned that the wildlife there had no voice, and Barbara was equally concerned, and after pondering on a solution, she came up with the idea of starting her organization. I feel Barbara found her calling. She is a perfect fit for this organization with her background in law as a paralegal that was heavily concentrated in real estate. Those experiences provided her with the tools needed to make the organization successful, such as handling real estate closings, inclusive of title searches, corporate and accounting experience. I want to say that the city of Northport has changed considerably. They've recently created a natural resource division, which is providing additional staff to help protect wildlife that exists in Northport, such as the Florida scrub jay, the Gopher tortoise, the manatee, the American alligator, and the bald eagle. This added manpower is necessary because of the rapid growth that's happening there. Those individuals check for the existence of listed species on properties to make accommodations for them, such as postponing clearing during nesting season or their removal. They will also work in keeping out invasive exotic species. In addition, staff will determine what trees can be removed per the city's tree ordinance. All of this must happen before building permits are issued. I do feel these changes have occurred because folks have spoken up for our environment. It is always important that people are active and speak up. There are various other groups that work to conserve species in Florida. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has a list that breaks down state wildlife species of special concern, threatened, or endangered. They total, just in the state, 134. You can see the reduction of flora and fauna species when viewing the FWC maps of Florida. Next slide, and I can't see it, so hopefully you're seeing Florida, yep. And you'll see that one side shows what it looked like, the development in the year 2010, compared to how they expect it will look come year 2070. And today, approximately 1,200 people are moving into Florida each day. Another important group is the Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation. They're working on connecting much of Florida's natural, undeveloped, open spaces, which is great, but it doesn't take care of our local area. And next screen, please. You can see by looking at the map on the screen areas that are left out, such as Southwest Florida. The Environmental Conservancy I represent is trying to fill in those gaps, those sections in our area that the larger groups cannot. There are other reasons to support conservation of land other than native wildlife, of course. Conserved land increases the value of neighboring properties. Water can percolate and be filtered into the local aquifer rather than becoming runoff that goes into our waterways. Like many of you, I've been astounded and even appalled by the number of acres cleared locally, the number of both commercial and residential construction units being built over the last few years. In Northport, development along River Road and Welland Park, which was earlier known as West Villages, has been mind-blowing. That community currently has 8,000 residents, and at full build-out will have more than 60,000 residents and 22,000 homes. According to the Welland Park website, this development was named the number 4 top-selling master plan community in the U.S. for 2020. Next slide, please. And I think what you're seeing now is an image of, if you go into the city of Northport's website, you will see all the different developments that are coming down the pike. And if you were to be on that site live and you click on those little icons, you'll see that, oh, that's 134 units, oh, that's 800 units. So there's a lot coming down the pike. When our Conservancy organization was first created, an article was published in 2 local newspapers, the Sun and the Tribune. The article announced that the Conservancy was established and also provided information about its first fundraiser. The call to action referenced the pursuit of 2 surplus county lots for sale in an active scrub jay zone in Northport. What followed was encouraging, to say the least. Money came in from folks we never knew, from people in the city of Sarasota, even from Florida's East Coast. Even though people from other places knew that the money they were donating was going to help a different area other than their own, they knew they were helping to preserve the habitat of some listed species. We were overwhelmed by this generosity, and besides ourselves, with joy to recognize people really do care. A grand total of $10,000 was raised in less than 2 weeks, and the properties were purchased. Since early 2020, the Conservancy has raised $237,550 through public donations, and we have spent it on 27 land purchases in Northport, Port Charlotte, Harbor Heights, El Jobin, and Deep Creek. All of this from donation. We do not receive money from city, county, state, or federal funding. Unfortunately, we have not found any grant money for purchasing land, although we continue to search. When people ask Barbara Lockhart why the Conservancy is trying to save land, she likes to say that, look at all those woods in our neighborhoods. They are just an illusion. Give it time. Development will take them out. Each lot in every block and every neighborhood is individually owned and subject to clear cutting for development. What does all this mean for our wildlife? What it means is that our land and the plants and animals that live on it rapidly are slipping away. Next slide, please. I think you see a for sale sign and a tortoise. Let's talk about native plant life for a moment. Next slide, please. These are cleared away daily, with few to none being planted back. It's obvious that without conservation and restoration efforts, development will eventually and completely erase our neighborhoods as we know them. Next picture, please. Next slide. While talking about Northport, I've been focusing on Sarasota County, but what about Charlotte County? The county's Planning and Zoning Department reported to me that over the last 4 years, 377 commercial buildings have gone up and 10,027 residential homes. You've seen it yourselves. There's the Westport development, there's Babcock Ranch, there's the Burnt Store Road developments. Another recent newspaper article stated that Babcock Ranch is projected to reach more than 12,000 residents by 2030, and Burnt Store Road more than 7,000 residents by the same time. With regards to the development along Burnt Store Road, you may have heard how animals in that vicinity are being killed on that road on a regular basis. As noted in the Sun newspaper, February 13, Ashley Cook, who is the Charlotte Harbor Environmental Center park manager, counted 102 dead animals on Burnt Store Road, about 25 species in a 6-month period: turtles, cranes, rabbits, an alligator, egrets, bobcats, raccoons, a great blue heron, an osprey, coyotes, and cows. Folks there are very disturbed. According to the paper, residents were told the county is creating a 250-foot buffer for the wildlife corridor. This size is a small piece of land compared to the area of land that will be cleared. There's also a greenway corridor planned. However, it wasn't made clear how much space that would take up. But with the mere number of homes going in, we know that wildlife and its habitat will be jeopardized, habitats that would normally provide food and shelter. The impacts of development show up in various forms, such as traffic congestion, noise, drainage problems, general pollution, including light pollution. Pollution to waterways via runoff, oil, fertilizers, etc., can cause blue-green algae that, it's said, can feed also red tide. Septic tanks also contribute to this problem. There is the inevitable noise that impacts humans and wildlife. Birds have a hard time hearing each other. They need their habitat kept intact. They need local plant life. The Environmental Conservancy has been trying to help two primary species in our area, the Florida scrubjay and the gopher tortoise. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that particular bird, the Florida scrubjay. These birds are only found in Florida, making them endemic. They are in the corvid family, which, to give you an idea, is the family crows are in. These birds are smart. They live in their own family groups, which makes them a cooperative breeder. They raise their young together with their offspring, sticking around after birth for a few years to help other siblings. One in their family will be the sentinel, who will perch on a high treetop or wire to keep outlook for dangerous hawks. If one is seen, they'll sound an alarm, and then all will dive for cover. If they see a snake, they'll call out a different alarm. The whole family will harass the intruder. They cache acorns as food source during the year in preparation for winter when insects are scarce. And FYI, they'll cache as many as 6,500 to 8,000 acorns a year, and remember where they put them. The Florida scrubjay is federally listed as threatened, which means it is likely to become endangered within the foreseeable future, and endangered means it is in danger of extinction. Next slide, please, and I think you'll see a scrubjay. Harbor Heights is an area that the experts say has one of the highest concentrations of scrubjays in Southwest Florida. Kudos to the county for preserving and purchasing land in the east side of the county for this species, but it doesn't protect these birds in Harbor Heights. That's why the Conservancy is pursuing land purchases there, where we believe the location is close enough for them to reach the county's east preserve properties. Sad to say, the general scrubjay population is in decline. In fact, it's already on the Federal Endangered Species Act list as threatened. That's primarily due to the development that we've been talking about. Scrubjays like a specific type of habitat, scrubby, that's high and dry, which is what the builders also like. And because they don't fly far, 5 miles is a stretch, although some have been documented to fly as far as 12 miles, they generally stay in the areas where they were first hatched. So when their habitats shrink, their numbers decline. That also puts them at risk of being isolated from each other, which is a genetic death sentence. It's interesting, just in Charlotte County alone, authorities have realized that there are different genetic makeups between different groups of the bird. Fish and Wildlife today is working on translocating some of them to keep their genetics healthily mixed. Otherwise, some experts say they will simply die off because of inbreeding. Despite all this, the scrubjay is not yet fully protected. If land is developed in Northport, for example, the developer may have to pay for building in an active scrubjay area, but that money doesn't stay in Northport. It goes to a state coffer for the purchasing of conservation in another part of the state, which, as I've said, does nothing to help protect our birds that are displaced from Northport. The history of gopher tortoise, at least in Florida, is a sad one because during the years prior to 2007, it was legal to bury them alive. This activity could and would happen when a development would go in. Finally, a law was put into place that prevented that from occurring any longer, with the exception that builders who had permits to bury were grandfathered in. This contributed to the listed species status the animal holds today, which is state threatened. Next slide, please. Although many people feel it should be listed federally. One of the benefits to having the gopher tortoise in our environment is because he is a keystone species, meaning 350 other species live in his burrow. So when you remove the tortoise, you remove all those other critters. Such critters include the Florida pine snake, the federally threatened eastern indigo snake, the Florida mouse, the gopher frog, and others. Their burrows, dug by using their front shovel-like legs, can be long and deep. It's been recorded that in the Florida Panhandle, one gopher tortoise burrow was 65 feet long and 25 feet deep, although the norm is considerably less. I suspect some of you have enjoyed seeing some of these critters in your neighborhood. They're often in their burrows where the temperature is comfortable, not too hot and not too cold, but they do come up to forage and mate. If you see one in the road, it is legal to move it, and we encourage you to do so, but of course, please be careful. We recommend you put your flashers on when doing this and be sure to move the tortoise in the direction he was moving in. As I said earlier, despite the efforts of our governments, their policies help, but may be too little too late. For example, the framework protections that are in place for the gopher tortoise is that they'll typically be relocated from land that's being developed to a recipient site that can be more than 100 miles away from its home. The Environmental Conservancy recognizes development is not going away. That would be unrealistic. But what we'd like to see, however, is a means of striking a balance between development and our natural environment for a long-term survival of our native flora and fauna. The Conservancy offers educational fundraising activities to the public, such as our recent 5K in Northport. This last November, we had a fundraiser in Harbor Heights called Music in the Park, and your church was kind enough to be a sponsor of that event with a generous $100 donation, and we want to say thank you very much. If you'd like to learn more about the Conservancy of Northport and surrounding areas, I'm happy to answer questions if we have time or after the service. And I also have some cards here. If anyone would like it, it has information about the Conservancy, and thank you very much. Next slide. I assume we don't have time, so for questions, I don't know. Maybe afterward. Yes, and so moving along, I would like to announce hymn number 134, Our World is One World.